Astronauts perform spacewalks where they go outside the spacecraft in space, and they do this for several reasons, like doing science experiments outside the spacecraft, to test new equipment, or to repair an old one. Spacewalks can last from 5 to 8 hours on average, and currently the world record for the most number of spacewalks is held by a Russian astronaut, Anatoly Solovyev. In order to go outside the spacecraft, astronauts need to wear spacesuits, and pressure becomes an issue for astronauts when they wear spacesuits. The atmospheric pressure inside the spacecraft is the same pressure we feel at sea level on Earth, but the spacesuits have much lower pressure than that. These spacesuits have to have the right amount of pressure. The pressure needs to be high enough for the astronauts to survive, but low enough for them to still move around inside the spacesuit with ease. The spacesuits have the same pressure you would feel if you were standing on top of Mount Everest, which is much lower than the pressure at sea level. So if astronauts suddenly go from a spacecraft pressure to a spacesuit pressure, their bodies are going to experience something called decompression sickness, or DCS. This sickness is also called the bends, and scuba divers also experience this because their bodies also experience rapid changes in pressure at different levels of water depth. This sickness can cause astronauts to feel numbness and tingling in their joints. So what exactly happens to the body during this sickness? We know there is nitrogen dissolved in our blood and body tissues. So when the pressure suddenly drops, the nitrogen comes out of solution and creates bubbles. This is very similar to opening a can of pop. Before you open a can of pop, there is certain pressure inside the can. And as you open it, the pressure inside the can suddenly decreases as the air can escape, and this sudden decrease in pressure causes the dissolved carbon dioxide to form bubbles. Similarly, if astronauts experience sudden decrease in pressure, nitrogen in their body can form tiny nitrogen bubbles in the tissue and the bloodstream, which can result in the astronauts feeling numbness and tingling in their joints. So how do astronauts solve this issue? Roughly 12 hours prior to the spacewalk, astronauts start to breathe pure 100% oxygen. This decreases the level of nitrogen in blood and body tissues, which in turn decrease the risk of the decompression sickness. When astronauts are set to go outside the spacecraft, they open the inner door of the airlock, step inside the airlock, and close the inner door. And then they let all the air inside the airlock out, and then they open the outer door. If they don't let the air out and open the outer door, there's going to be a huge difference in pressure between the airlock and outside in space. So the moment they open the outer door, all the air is going to rush out and can damage the spacecraft and hurt the astronauts. That's why astronauts have to let the air out in the airlock before opening the outer door. And they do the same when they finish their spacewalk and enter the spacecraft. First, they open the outer door, step inside the airlock, close the outer door, and then they fill the airlock with air, so there isn't a drastic difference in pressure between the airlock and the other side of the inner door. Once they fill the airlock with air, then they can open the inner door and go inside without damaging the spacecraft. When astronauts are performing their spacewalks, they are tethered to the spacecraft, which essentially means they're tied to a rope that is connected to the spacecraft. So astronauts don't just float away in space. Astronauts also wear simplified aid for EVA rescue, or SAFER, which is like a jetpack, so astronauts can move around in space. In case something happens to the rope, astronauts can use the SAFER to come back to the spacecraft. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.